I relate that to Abraham Lincoln and how things have changed in the 200 years since Abraham Lincoln came to Indiana. Then he chopped down all the trees with his axe, washed all the soil away, and now we're kind of fixing Abe's mistakes for the last 100 years. But people get mad at me at that when I say that, because oh, Abe's awesome, and he is. But that's pretty much what we did. We cut down all the trees, watched the soil wash away. Abe went to Illinois and left us with eroded soil. So we talk about that quite a bit. But what I'm here to talk to you guys today about is foraging. So pretty big crowd, really a nice turnout. So who loves to go through the woods and just eat stuff? All right. Oh, I'm gonna eat that. I do that all the time. We do a lot of edibles, wild edibles hikes at the state park. I call them Hunger Games hikes. You guys ever watch the Hunger Games? Katniss Everdeen is the protagonist of that show, and Katniss is actually an edible plant, and it's in great abundance. I'm sure in Kentucky too, but certainly in Indiana where we have it at the state park. Anybody know what Katniss is? It's got several names. You know what it is? And you got any other names for me on that?
What?
Got any other names for me? There's like a whole bunch of names for it. Duck potato, arrowhead.
Oh, arrowhead. Yeah.
Shaped like arrowhead. So that's Katniss. That was on the Hunger Games, and she talks about her father named her that because if she could ever find her namesake, she would never starve to death. And that's part of what kind of got me interested, or helped get me interested in that. Got a lot of young teenage girls that would come to those Katniss hikes. You know, that was their hero. So people are like, now they're kind of like, what? The little girls don't read those books anymore for some reason. But so that's gone passe. I just call it wild edibles hike. I do want to introduce my wife, Kathleen. I know some of you folks are from Owensboro. How many of you lived in Owensboro your entire lives? So Kathleen used to be a runner here for Apollo High School. She won like 10 state cross country and track championships. And then
Bimal.
Bimal?
I thought it was all for almost 30 years.
Oh!
I see the picture on the wall. I see the picture on the wall.
See, I told you that was her picture.
My dad taught at Kentucky Wesleyan, Walter Bimal, and my mom taught kindergarten. So, yep.
At Burns Elementary?
No. Oh, I went to Burns, yeah.
Where did she teach?
She taught at Immaculate, and she taught a few other places, but mostly at Immaculate.
Okay, so I brought her because since I'm from Indiana and she's Kentucky, I thought she might smooth things out for me a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah, fourth grade. Yeah, fourth grade.
So what I did, instead of having a PowerPoint here, because it's really difficult, I think it's really difficult to look at pictures of things and then go out in the woods and decide, oh wow, I know what that is, but you really don't. And you really don't want to go out and say, I think that's what he said that is. Because there are plants out there, and mushrooms in particular, that can kill you pretty quickly. So we got to know a little bit. Almost everything is edible out there in some way, shape, or form. It's just some that aren't, that can make you sick or that can actually kill you. So we're going to talk about some of the main ones. I'm going to bring some of this around, let you guys look at it. Eventually, I brought a knife here. We'll cut it up and maybe we'll have even a little snack afterwards, if you guys can stand it. So, couple things about actually being out in the woods and eating the stuff. You really need to know what you're eating. You really need to see somebody do that, or maybe watch it on YouTube, or in this case, I'm going to bring a bunch of these here because there are lots of plants that look alike. Lots of people have allergies to certain types of plants, and you don't want to get into an allergy situation there. Most of these wild edibles don't really have a high allergy quotient, but at the same time, they can make you sick. You got to know if they're ripe. You got to know what they look like when they're ready to eat, because you can say, oh, pokeberry, has anybody ever, who eats poke? Never eaten?
No.
You have eaten poke. So you pick it, you boil it down, right? And then you wash the water out and you boil it some more. And then it's boil it 3 or 4 times and you eat it. It's got to be this big. If it grows up, everything is poisonous, part of that. Mayapple, have you guys know what I'm talking about with the mayapple? Have you eaten mayapple? Who's eaten mayapple? That's the same thing. That thing's really pretty good to eat. The yellow mayapple, once that green mayapple turns yellow, you can eat it. But before that, everything on that plant's poisonous and can make you really, really sick. So you really got to know. The other thing is, we have 12 months in this year. And not everything is ripe all the time. It's not like you're going to go out there and find all of this stuff at the same time. This fall program that I'm doing right now is pretty good because lots of things are available to us right now. And they're edible, and they're ripe, and they're ready to go. Fall is a great time to be foraging. Spring is not too bad. Summer's okay. Winter is actually not too bad if you know what you're looking for. And you have a little tie. A lot of times I'll tie some things off because the plants die. But if you know where they are, you can dig them up and eat the roots. And the winter roots are really important because, the Native Americans, and we think, man, those poor people, they couldn't have had any food. But when the wetlands were going and the cattails were up and the American lotus was standing tall, they didn't have any problem finding food. There was food everywhere. One thing I like to remind everybody too is, since I'm an Abraham Lincoln guy, I always have to bring everything back to Abraham Lincoln. 200 years ago, the Ohio River flowed freely. If it flooded, it flooded, right? It was all the way up into Little Pigeon in Indiana, 40 miles north. It's not this controlled system that we have now. There were wetlands all along the Ohio River in Kentucky and Indiana that spread for miles and miles. And you had American lotus, you had cattails, you had all kinds of cactus grows right along the edges of these marshy, swampy areas. Just a smorgasbord of food. That has changed because we've harnessed that river, and that river does this, right? It's like a series of lakes. And if it gets up over the banks, we go crazy. But it has really changed the ecosystem around Indiana and Kentucky because we control that river so much. So the food supplies are not as huge as they used to be 200 years ago, 100 years ago. I'm going to start pulling some of this stuff out. I break this down a lot of times. I talk about the yard stuff that you just walk out in your yard, eat it, almost all of it. Almost all of your yard is edible. I just brought a few things here. I could go on and on. I'm going to try not to go on and on, but I could go on and on. This one here I potted today. But no, you can't see this very well. We'll get a look at it here in a little bit. Who knows what that is? It's everywhere.
Ivy.
Not ivy. It's violet. Yeah, it's the violet that you would just find in your front yard in the springtime. You got the purple flowers, sometimes they're white. You can even find yellow violets in the woods. You guys ever find the yellow violets? That's all edible, and it's pretty good. When we start talking about edible greens, when I do the program for kids, I always say, well, it's like Flintstone vitamins. They don't know what Flintstone vitamins is. They're like, gummy bear vitamin? It's hard for me to relate to the little kids anymore. This kind of thing, if I'm a pioneer, when the greens came up in the springtime, they would have been all over these. They would have been eating salt pork all winter, right? And they would have put salt pork, ham. They would have been eating all that. That's just that heart shape. It's got a tooth leaf there. In the spring and even through part of the summer, that's going to be. Did you get to see that very close? Just the heck out of that. And I think this is, in my opinion, this is probably the tastiest green there is. There's probably more, but this one I like the best. One of the first ones out, one of the last ones gone. So you find it in your yard, you let it grow. Kathleen gets mad at me all the time. How come we don't have landscaping? How come we don't have wood chips around our... Well, I got the greenery. I got this natural greenery, and if the zombies come after us, I'm going to be out there eating those greens, and you're going to be starving. So it's a great, it really is, it doesn't get much bigger than this. I mean, it can get a little bit leggy sometimes, get kind of tall, but it's a real nice green to keep around your house, and then you can eat it anytime you want to. Very, very high in nutrients. Very high in nutrients. And while we're doing this, I see you guys taking notes. And I'm not an electronic guy. I don't like doing PowerPoints and stuff like that. But what I do recommend, and you can do this or not, it's up to you. It's really easy to go out into the woods or into your yard, whatever, take a picture. And iPhones have this. You guys know this? How many people know this?
Yeah, actually, what do you?
It's just iPhone. I just take a dang picture and then I push the little leaf under the picture, because it has a leaf under there. I'll push that picture and it tells me what it is.
Picture this. That app, picture this.
There's one called Picture This. This, I guess it came with the phone, but it's pretty good. So I can go right here. I can take this picture. And you guys can do this as well. As I'm talking about some of these, if you want to look them up on your phone, that would be great too. That wouldn't bother me at all. So then there's a little information eye there. It says plant. It says Canadian wild ginger. It's completely wrong. This is a great point. Just because your phone tells you, don't believe it. You still got to be ready. You still got to know what you're looking at. It does look like wild ginger. Anybody know what wild ginger looks like? It's a heart. It's a dark green heart-shaped leaf. It's bigger than this. Grows closer to the ground. It is edible. You can use it similar to the ginger we use today. It's in really deep, moist soils. You'll find it everywhere. But ginger's not like a weed. Violet's like a weed. Ginger's not like a weed. Here's one of my other favorites here, and I got these out of my yard. This is one you guys can take a picture of if you want to. See if they'll bring that up.
Just bring it over here if you would. Just, yeah, that's good.
This gets 7 or 8 feet tall.
That's good.
The chemical pesticide companies advertise against it all the time. Oh, it kills. Not dandelion. It's lamb's quarters. It's also called goosefoot. It's also called pigweed. Just about everything's called pigweed too. Don't read something and say, oh, that's pigweed, because there's like 4 or 5 or 10 things that people call pigweed. So you gotta be real careful about those types of things. The common names are a little confusing, but we're not even going to get into the scientific names. That's
Nightshade?
not nightshade.
Is that lamb's quarter?
This is lamb's quarter.
Okay. That's what it said.
So lamb's quarter gets to be about, it'll get to be 8 to 10 feet tall. Right now, most of the lamb's quarters in my yard is seeding out. These are protein source. But these leaves are way more, I shouldn't say way more, they're at least as nutritious as spinach. And generally speaking, they're a little more nutritious than spinach. This is a regular cultivated spinach. Some people call it that. It's on, there's a whole bunch of... Let me use my app. Okay.
We use it kind of like lettuce. Put it on tacos or salad.
Lamb's quarters, yes. Okay. So with that, what do you call it?
It's white goosewood, fat hen, lamb's quarter, pigweed, baconweed, fat hen, red goosewood, well.
Yes, I did.
No, yeah, so this is just a new
I love spinach, so I
So I
like
got
it.
this just recently out of my yard. But the ones that grew up early, they'll start growing every one of those weeds up. And they'll start growing pretty early in March and April. And like I said, right now they're seeding. I mean, they'll give you 500,000 seeds. That's why farmers don't like them, because they'll
Oh,
just seed
my
like this.
goodness. Yeah.
There's another one that's.
There were
Okay,
seeds
what,
that called
oh,
pigweed.
that's the one.
Oh, you have it? Is it on there?
No, I've never seen it. But we have two small seeds we can grow around.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
This is an amaranth.
It's genus.
So that's another one that grows in your yard a lot, or if you have an old garden, that utility garden, the amaranth was done, and they literally have millions of seeds on them. It doesn't vary. Amaranth is good to eat when it's little. And it's also made into salad. It's all kinds of
Just takes forever.
Okay, so how's it going with the phone app stuff? Those are really good apps, but they can be wrong. So be careful about that. If you have picture books, even if you talk to a naturalist, you want to watch that naturalist eat that first. I tricked you back there. I tricked you. No, I didn't. So I eat this all the time. Kathleen and I put it in, like she said, tacos. We put it in soups. We put it in anything like lettuce or anything you eat spinach with. Pretty good. All right, this one, I'm not going to come walking around with this one. Anybody know what this one is?
Asparagus.
Yeah. So who's ever foraged asparagus? You got to do that on the road. You drive along the old back roads, man, and this stuff sticks up at you. Then it dies. So that's when you got to put a flag, or you got to tie something to the tree where you saw that in the wintertime or in the summertime, because a lot of times that'll go away. The county crews will come and mow and just knock all that down. If you see this, and a lot of times you see it in bunches, the big, fluffy, feathery bunches, and they get yay tall. They usually have red berries on them this time of year. Those are poisonous. Don't eat the berries. But then in the springtime, about the same time the morel mushrooms are coming up. So we're talking about basically the month of April. You've got to go back to where you tied that ribbon and hope that you're not in somebody's asparagus patch that also did the same thing you did. And then they'll grow up. I mean, they'll start growing up, and they'll be the little spuds that we know as asparagus. And it really all that is escape to domestic asparagus is really what it is. So you might want to call that an invasive species. I don't really call it that. But this is, again, high protein, and asparagus is really high up in the palatability scale, I guess. A lot of people love that. Okay, so you also get the dandelions. And I think most of the people understand that. Dandelion leaves are very high in nutrient value. You really ought to boil that, and a big part of these, I don't always boil this stuff, but it probably make it a little bit safer and a little bit better for you. But dandelion in particular has that Elmer's glue latex stuff to it. So when you break that stuff open, you got that white gluey stuff. You don't really want that. That gives it a bitter taste. Dandelion, to me, again, it's highly nutritious. But I never lay awake at night thinking, man, I wish I had a dandelion leaf sandwich. Never have done that. It's good for you, but I don't think it's particularly tasty. But if you boil it and get that white latex stuff out of it, it's much better. It's much more palatable. So however you would fix a normal green, which I don't know how many people eat turnip greens and stuff like that anymore. A lot of people don't do that. But if you do greens, or you want that high nutritious stuff, take these greens from your yard, boil them. You can do that with the violet, the little fake strawberries, the little mock strawberries you get in your yard. They taste like styrofoam. They taste like almost no taste whatsoever. But the leaves are nutritious as well, and there's some nutrients in those berries as well. But again, I would think you would. I mean, listen, I eat it all the time, but I don't eat it in great amounts like a bear does. You know, I just show people, oh look, you can eat this, and I don't necessarily enjoy it, but it is highly nutritious, and you got to remember that. Another thing I like to talk about is some of your everyday stuff that people see all the time and they know it very well. Kind of have surprises for you. Can anybody recognize this? This is kind of a baby, actually. Probably already, you probably have it in your yard.
Onion grass.
I'm going to show you these little potatoes at the bottom. This is this already blossomed. The main leaves have kind of died. This is basically daylily.
Oh.
So this is your orange daylily, or people call them ditch lily, or whatever you want to call them. The
Tiger
orange
lilies.
ones.
Tiger lilies.
Tiger lilies. And you guys can look that up on your phone. Take that phone one step further. If you recognize it and you get the picture, read about it. You can go to recipes. It'll tell you, let this stuff soak for 24 hours. It'll tell you all kinds of different types of things. So once you find it, once you're comfortable with the plant that you got, you really need to do research about how to fix it and how to fix it safely. Like I said, there are some very, very specific ways to fix some of this food. I'm not going to take you through a lot of that stuff. I'm going to show you stuff you can just eat right now. So these are just little potatoes. Daylilies have potatoes on them. They don't get any bigger than that. But I got a little knife that's an all-purpose knife, and I just went down there and wrenched it around and loosened it up and picked these up. And I only got 3 on this one, but a lot of times there's 10 or 12 on there. So that's just a daylily. High starch. I mean, if you go down to the, Wesselman, or you go down to the grocery store and buy potatoes, it's the same thing. It's a little easier.
Those are perfect.
It's not
for
as fun.
soup.
Pardon?
Those are perfect for soup.
Have you ever eaten them?
No,
Well, you should try that.
I'm going to.
You should try that. Yes.
How big do those tubers get?
About this big. That's about it. I've never seen any bigger than that. About the size, about half the size of your pinky tip there. Not too much bigger. I'll walk by here real quick so you guys can all see it. I'll go slow. Okay. These are the orange daylilies. A lot of people call them ditch lilies, but not tiger lilies. You guys hear that? It's probably listed as tiger lily. That's the thing with the common names. You got your own. Okay, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. Another thing that I like to break things down to is I talk about the wetlands, and we've already talked about catnus a little bit. Catnus is really a wetland plant, although I have found it on hills. And the first time I ever found it was I used to raise bison. We raised buffalo in Lincoln City for a long time, and I've been looking for it for years. This Apios americana is what it is, or ground nut. And I'm not seeing it right now. Oh, here we go. And I don't have the plant, I don't have the leaves for it, but you guys can look that up on your phone. You can look up Apios americana,
Spell
Apios americana. It's also called groundnut. This stuff is everywhere. Purdue University in the 1930s was going to make this into one of the biggest cash crops ever. They did a lot of research. Production was high. Starch, basically potatoes, wild plant. It takes 2 years to make a really good crop. So that shot that. You didn't want your cornfields laying fallow for 2 years. You couldn't live on a one paycheck every 2 years, right? So that went away. But that tells you that this is a prolific plant. Now this is what I'm talking about when I talk about winter plants. Okay? If you know where these plants are, you can find them in the winter. So during the zombie apocalypse, you guys have your Apios americana flag. You can go get that when nobody else is going to see that. And all of the plants are dead. You're going to see the leaves. Now what you will see is a green bean pod. So not only does this produce this string, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this later. I'm going to tell you about this, but it produces these potatoes and it produces green beans. So you get your green beans and potatoes in one plant. and that's the truth. Now the green beans are a little fibery. They're not like lush. I mean, they're not bad, especially if you get them young, but when they have already developed their bean and their bean is viable and a seed, it's just like any green bean. It's kind of stringy. So, and they're only about that big. But at the end of the season, that's the best way to find them. You find them, and they turn dark brown and they split open, and they'll just dangle there. And that's the best way to find them. That's even the best way. A lot of times, that's the best way to find them. Not even in the winter. In the summertime, you find those dangly leaves there because it grows along bushes and along the banks of shores, and it grows up trees. And a lot of times, you have to be kind of really looking for it and really know what you're looking for to find it. But if you see those bean pods hanging down, it's really good. That's another one you need to look up, is the bean pods. But this is more of it's like a chain of potatoes. So this is the fat one. And I've never really found anyone many bigger than that. If you read the books, I've read books and said, oh, they're big as a man's fist. And I've never found one as big as a man's fist, but this is about the size that I've found. And then they come on a chain like that. You find one, there'll be a little smaller one there, and then a little smaller one there, then a little bit smaller one there. So they come on those chains. And it's just basically a potato. That's what it is. High starch, but you can get the green beans out of it as well. But that's what you're looking at. Now, I fixed this 3 different ways. Actually, accidentally, I had my son, he was about 8. And first time I ever found him. And I said, oh yeah, I think you can eat these. Raw. Gross. This has the leg and stuff too. So if you start looking, this one might get super dry right now. Maybe that's the problem. But the last time I dug them up, it's starting to get a little latex. You can see that glue, that Elmer's glue coming out of there. If you peel it and then boil it, it's really just like a potato. If you stick it in there and boil it, like I boil potatoes sometimes with the skin on, then it tastes exactly like dirt. So unless you're a dirt guy or a girl, peel it. Yeah. It should be a lot. It should be all along. No, ours is already done blooming. I couldn't find a single blossom. Not really. Mauve, yes.
Yeah.
Like a cascading mauve flower. It's real pretty. It's a real understated flower. Grows on a vine like a bean. So it'll have 5 or 6 leaflets on them. Yeah, hold that up. And anybody look at that flower. If you can look it up on your phones, look it up. Yes. Now that's lighter. That's kind of the back. The bottoms are kind of a brownish mauve is the best. Mauve is a good way.
That's
Mauve.
what color it is.
I say brownish purple. The Apios americana, which is also the ground nut. The flower, you know where that flower. It is a pea, basically. It's in the bean family. So, yeah, the whole green bean thing, it's a pod, it's a nitrogen fixer, lots of great things about it. And it is prolific. So, I know I was. When we get on the phone, stir them up. So, I'm digging up, right? First time I found it, I'm digging with a shovel. Actually, I got my loader, my tractor loader, and I cheated, so I was like, oh man, look at all these. And I found a whole bunch of them. But then I'm thinking, man, that's hard, you know, digging and finding them. I got it with a hammer today. I was out with my hammer just digging. They're only about that deep. They're only about that deep into the ground when you find them. But it's usually clay soil. My son and I, again, we were out fishing for grinnell on Little Pigeon Creek after a big storm. And we're paddling along. And all along the side of Little Pigeon Creek, the sandy bank had washed away, and there's just Apios americana just laying there because they were growing along the edge of that bank. So I'm just picturing, you know, 300 or 400 years ago, you know, the Native Americans were like, well, after this rain, we might go collect some potatoes if you're hungry for potatoes, because they were just prolific. And a lot of them, this is real rough, and I don't know if that's because it's growing in my field and not in sand. If it's growing in clay, I don't know. I've only found them rough and warty like this whenever I find them. But along the creeks, they tend to be round and smoother. So I'm going to guess there may be subspecies to that. I've never seen a subspecies, but they do present themselves differently than gnarly. Okay, I'm going to pass this around. Not like we're having a party or anything, but if you guys are interested in a snack, I'm going to pass these around. Now you can get these open with your fingernails. Okay, so I'm going to pass these around. You don't have to eat them, but you got to watch me first. So this is from the American lotus. Lily pad. There's my persimmons. I had my persimmons hidden in there. This is the lily pad that is perfectly round. It is native to the United States of America. It is very prolific. I planted I think I had 8 seeds I put in my pond about 10 years ago. The whole pond is rung with these things right now. I can't pull a fish in because they go through the thing. Makes my son so mad because he can't fish anymore. So the big round lily pad produces these silly looking things that we have used for years in dry flower arrangements. They sit there, the biggest wildflower in North America, the big yellow wildflower sits up this big, and then it falls off and it has this little shower head on there. And when that shower head, this is halfway between ripe and not ripe right now. That little shower head is ripe. It drops its seeds down and plants its seeds all over the place. And it really is prolific. So, you guys are still holding back. Are you digging your seeds out yet?
Yeah.
Don't eat them yet. It won't kill you if you do. But this thing, again, I was at Lincoln State Park for a long, long time. We killed them now. We drained the lake for 4 days in the wintertime. 2 winters in a row, and we wiped out all of our American lotus. We still have spatterdock. That's a whole other story. I'm not going to get into. But we wiped out all of these. Two cold winters without water on top of them. But so anyway, we're going to take these and we're going to peel them open.
You did that on purpose, or?
We did it to fix a dock. We didn't do it to kill them. Now, we spray these sometimes because they get so, we couldn't get our boats in and out of our boat rental, and we couldn't launch boats because there were so many of these. So we sprayed them in certain areas. But that was an accident. We were lowering our lake so we could fix a wall, and then killed all of them. So you should have something like this once you peel that. And then we're going to take our fingernails again, we're going to crack that open, there's going to be a little baby American lotus in there. And we're going to take that little baby American lotus out. Now you don't have to, and if you guys want to, you can taste it, but it's kind of gross. It's got a bitter taste. You can eat it if you want to, it's not going to kill you or make you sick. Should be fine. So there are, and again, this is the whole thing you got to know about foraging. It goes from green, and you can get it with your fingernails, to this guy, after it turns brown. These silly things are hard as a rock. I mean, they look like a .40 caliber round ball for a muzzleloader, and they feel about like that too. I've always wondered if I could shoot that out of my .45 caliber muzzleloader, but it's really hard. Throw it back, and it would really hurt. But there is good meat in here. I always just take this dark one when they're brown like this, and I put it in a piece of fabric, and then I hit it with a hammer. Because if you hit it with a hammer, I'm always going, just barely hitting it, but then you hit it hard enough, it just explodes. So you got to hit it inside of the fabric, and then you get that meat out of there, which is the same as this meat, except it's not. It's harder. It's different. Edible, same dang plant. This is just about 3 weeks ahead of this. So this is still really good. But this is good too. You can eat it now if you want to. If you got the green thing out, you can try that.
So you take this whole green thing out of the center.
Yeah, take that whole green thing.
You just eat the outside.
I wouldn't eat the outside. You probably could. Oh, okay. So this green thing, see that little green thing in there? So you break that a little bit first. Yeah, you take that. Anybody feeling dizzy yet? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm gonna try to speed this up a little bit, then we'll go with questions. Two things going on right now in the woods. Anybody here named Susie? Anybody know the song? What's this? How's it go?
Where, oh, where is Susie? Where, oh, where is Susie? Where, oh, where is Susie? Way down yonder, the pawpaw patch. Pick it up, pawpaws, put them in a basket.
Okay, all right. These are the pawpaws. Who loves pawpaws? Who doesn't love pawpaws? Yeah, not a fan, huh? We call these the Indiana banana. I don't think we call them the Kentucky banana. I think we call them the Indiana banana. Cut these bad boys open. They got huge seeds in them. Super odoriferous, I guess you would say. Smell really good. Attract the possums, the coons, the deer, whatever else. Whatever starts to smell these things will come over. So you got to beat them to them. The best trick that I've come across. Now sometimes these things were 30 feet in the air. But to beat the coons to them, they gotta have a little mush to them when they're still on the tree. If you go and take a pawpaw and you look at that pawpaw and you're like, oh man, that's awesome. And it's hard as a rock. You can't mush it. Don't pick it because it won't ripen. There's a guy up in Dale, Indiana that is a pawpaw farmer. And he's got 30 pawpaw trees, and they're a cultivated plant, and they've been, made better over the years. He's got them in broad sunlight, bright sunlight. Doesn't have it. We always think, oh, pawpaws are in the shade. Well, that's probably why they don't produce anything, because they're in the shade in the woods, right? So he puts them out in his yard, and he'll go up there. And he took me on a tour last week. He's like, feel that. You got a little mush there. Well, that'll go ahead and ripen. That one, you know, they'll be hard as a rock. They look like they're ready to eat. They look beautiful and almost fluorescent green. They look about like your shirt there, like that bright fluorescent green sometimes. If you can't mush them, don't get them. But if you can mush them a little bit, then you can put them on your counter and they'll ripen over the next few days, and it'll smell really good for you.
How do you know when they're ripe? Do they turn dark brown?
Dark brown's a little too brown, yeah. So when they start getting this darker green, not quite that bright green, it's like a bright green they have. When they start getting that darker green coloration to them, and these brown stripes kind of, but it's really the feel. I mean, if they feel mushy, they're right. They're ready to go.
Pass those back.
Okay, I'll pass one on this side.
They're good for baking.
I'm gonna open some up here, and you guys can have a chance to taste them. We made pawpaw bread, so I got the pulp out of it. So those things, you know, colander, those hand colanders, don't stick them in your KitchenAid, because it'll break that KitchenAid thing. Don't do that. Put it in the hand colander. You don't have to cook it.
It's not sweet.
Yeah, it's super sweet. And I just pull it like this. Got to drip all over the place. And I just pull it like that, and then I'll pull that stuff around the seed. And then the seeds have flesh around them too. It's hard to get all the flesh off of those seeds. But yeah, I'll pass that around if you guys want to pass that around. It's got the texture of banana, very highly nutritious, has potassium in it. And this is pawpaw season, so usually the last of the pawpaw season, and I don't know if it'd be longer in Kentucky or shorter in Kentucky, but and I'm only like 20 minutes north of you guys, so the last week of September maybe. We have our marathon this weekend, and we put out all of our stuff. I mean, in September, middle of September, and we always still have pawpaws in the middle of September. But I may be getting them in the last week of August this year. So last week of August to middle of September is pawpaw season, and that's when you really need to go get them. So that's a good one, and I'm going to cut these up here, and if you guys want to taste them a little bit, take a little piece of that, you can. Where's my other? Okay, so these guys, how many of you guys make persimmon pudding? Persimmon pudding?
Bread.
Persimmon bread? You know what the pudding is? Have you ever made the pudding? My mom used to make persimmon pudding, and it had the consistency of a not quite done brownie. But it's orange, and it's got that real powerful persimmon taste. These guys are not ready. Now, it's a fallacy to say that it has to be frosted on. That is not true. They do not have to be frosted on. Even that's middle of October for us, really, the first frost. And these are usually gone by then. I got within about 8 steps of a little 6-point buck today, and he was eating these things off the ground, and they weren't ripe for us, but he was fine with them. But he's like, man, I'm eating these persimmons. And I just kept walking up on him, and he's like, he's an ugly little thing, but he liked those persimmons. So these aren't ready, but they have to be, they'll make you pucker. Yeah, they'll make you pucker. And so these, I always say, if that skin breaks, I mean, that's kind of my test. If that skin breaks, if they'll fall off the tree, boom, and that skin's broken a little bit and they've kind of smashed a little bit, I think that makes them ready. But just because there's one on the ground doesn't mean that these are ready. So if you don't, I mean, it's really, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've eaten a few that have puckered me, that's why I know why they're ripe. So you might have to eat a few that pucker you to know that they're ripe. But persimmons are, again, they're prolific, and I pulp them. I mean, I'll eat them raw. You can just take this little top off and then just eat them raw and spit the seeds out. But really, to me, the best way is to use them. You can make a jam out of them. You can make the bread out of them. You can make the pudding out of them. And there's probably 18 million other things you could put them into if you really thought about how to do that. Okay. Here's a weird one, and I'll stop at this one. And let you guys ask me some questions. Who's seen this? What is it?
Passion fruit.
How long have you guys known that?
We watch the leads all the time.
Do you? I did too, and then last year I saw a flower. So look that up on your phones because that's worth the look. Purple passion flower. I think it is Passiflora incarnata. Passiflora incarnata. Look that up and look at that passion flower. It is fantastic. And I saw it for the first time 3 years ago at Charlestown State Park over near Louisville. And I looked at that and I thought, listen guys, I'm a redneck. I mean, I've been in the woods all my life. My dad would wake me up with snakes. He put snakes in my bed. You're sleeping too late, boy. I mean, I'm pretty red. I never saw it. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a beautiful flower. It's got these long petals that are long, stringy purple and pinkies, or purple and light pink. And I thought, well, that's an invasive species. You know, we're over here by Louisville. I was by Louisville when I first saw it, and I thought, that thing's got to be invasive. There were these, you know, those beautiful flowers just like 100 yards along this trail. And I'm just like, man. So then I found them on my farm. And I thought, man, what the heck are these things? So I looked them up. Sure enough, they're native throughout the entire eastern, basically all the way up to Michigan, down into Florida and Texas and to the Mississippi, basically. Fantastic. And so not only do they have that great flower, but you can eat these things. These are probably not quite ripe. They tend to be, see, this is getting yellow. And if you look up just passion fruit, it's going to show you like 40 different kind of passion fruit. There's purple and there's all kinds of different colors, and they're usually tropical. But ours is they call it the purple passion. There's a lot of different names, but Passiflora incarnata is the best way to look that up because that will give you this. And I think there are cultivated species, but this turns yellow and gets wrinkly. And when these things are growing, they're like cotton. I mean, they're super light. I mean, there's hardly any weight to them whatsoever. And then when they start to get ripe, they get heavy and they get thick and they start dropping, and usually they turn yellow. So I'm going to open this up. This is really close. I'm not going to say this is totally right, but it's pretty darn close. And I'm going to pass this around to you guys. It's almost like a pomegranate, where these seeds have gelatin wrapped around them, basically. So you eat those seeds. I think it's lemony. If you really want to, you can grab a seed out of there, stick it in your mouth. Do we have an EMT here? I don't think it'll hurt you, but you're gonna eat one. Anybody have a? You eat one. Let's do it. Okay. Anybody have an EpiPen?
It's peppery.
Is it puckering you in there? Those are absolutely native. Aren't those flowers beautiful? You guys see them? Beautiful. Just amazing to me. I've never seen a flower this was 3 years ago. I've never seen a flower that just had long stringy petals, you know. They're usually petals. These are just strings, you know. Just really cool. So that's an awesome one. Okay, I know I said that'd be my last, but I'm going to have one last thing here. In memoriam. This is actually a Chinese or a hybrid chestnut. Now we have to all take a deep breath here. and think about 200, 300 years ago, American chestnut was maybe not quite here. We may be a little far west from the main territory of the American chestnut, but the American chestnut was 1 in every 4 trees on the eastern seaboard. It was the most important tree ever, you know, in the United States of America. It produced these spiny, this is again it's either a hybrid or a Chinese chestnut. It produced these spiny, horribly spiny, you can't put much pressure on that at all or those things penetrate. You'll start bleeding with just a little bit of pressure on these husks. Imagine Daniel Boone walking through the forest. I mean, you can't walk barefooted through the forest with these things. You would be, it'd be like stepping on baby porcupines everywhere you went. So, 1 in every 4 trees was American chestnut. The American chestnut produced fruit every year. Sometimes our hickories don't produce, sometimes our because they get frosted. Sometimes our walnuts don't produce for whatever reason. So you'll be like, God dang, last year I had 4 bushels out of that walnut tree and nothing. So it's variable a lot of times. And those people relied on these foods. This put out its flowers a little bit later than the last frost and was 100%, almost, that's what I've read. Obviously I wasn't there. But this is basically 100% reliable. 3 nuts inside of there. The Native Americans call them the breadfruit or the bread nut because they could make flour out of that. They could make everything out of that. This fed passenger pigeons by the billions, bears, elk, bison, humans, anything you can imagine. This guy was there. And we can't even imagine that, can we? That's just gone, and we just don't even know that. We can tell each other that, but we have no idea what it was like, you know, to have that. So I'm going to let this go here. I've got a few other things here if you want to come look at it. But if you guys have questions or comments that you want to talk to me about, I'm willing to take that. Yes?
Well, are American chestnuts, did they develop a disease that they're gone, or are they just not as popular?
No, American chestnut got the chestnut blight, which was probably from bringing in Chinese or Japanese chestnuts to eat. And then it brought a blight, which is a fungus. And then that fungus just whoosh,
Wiped them all.
well, I mean, it was a matter of a couple of decades, and the American chestnut was basically gone. It's a blight that works on the stem of the tree, and so for a long time, it was about 1920 when this came. So it works on the stem of the tree. About the time American chestnut gets to be mature enough to produce its own nuts, it dies. So over the course of the last 100 years or so, it's been dying. They've been dying. So there are some still out there that maybe are producing a little bit. So there's a place in near Patoka Lake called Southern Indiana Purdue Agricultural Center, something like that, SIPAC. They've planted a whole bunch of what they think are resistant American chestnuts that are 100% American chestnuts that they've planted, and they're trying to produce a super breed of that. All right? 100% chestnut.
But it'll be 20 years before they know.
Well, it shouldn't be that long because they've done that 20 years ago. The other thing is people are gene splicing. And the other thing is they are hybridizing with Chinese and Japanese chestnuts. So there's a bunch of hybrid chestnuts out there. So the white-tailed deer hunters love to go, I haven't done it yet, but I keep thinking I'm going to, buy chestnut trees. And I think they're hybrids, but I'm not sure. Some of them are just hybrids that they've bred together naturally. Other ones are hybrids that they've taken the gene out, put that gene over here. So genetically modified. So we have some that I planted that I'm pretty sure are 100% American chestnut in the state park. I've got about 11 over there. Our friends group bought those, so we've got them trying to grow them. I don't know if it'll work out or not. So yeah, the American chestnut's gone because of that. We can't call it extinct yet because we're still fighting like crazy to figure something out. But it's going to be similar to the Dutch elm disease, the emerald ash borer for the ash trees.
We see, we don't, it's not infrequent though to see the sprouts when like we go hiking on the Appalachian Trail or just, or, you know, in the mountains.
So they get to about yay
Yeah, they
big.
get about this tall and then they die, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got hope. You know, there's hope there, but maybe or maybe not. Anything else?
Do you eat personally?
Pardon?
Do you eat personally?
Yep. Purslane is another one of those herbs that's really, really good for you. This purslane is droopy, and even when I picked it, because it's so dry. Purslane's usually like, its leaves are fat, you know? They've just got moisture in them and they're
How do you
fat.
spell it?
Purslane. Purslane.
Okay.
What do you put in your salad?
I just do that. You can eat it. Mostly I show off. So when I'm out with a group doing a hike, you know, I'll be like, oh yeah, I eat this all the time. Oh my God, he's eating it, you know. That's the type of people I usually get. The people that work for me are like, I can't believe he's gonna eat that.
I've seen it, but,
What are you gonna make us eat today?
I don't see it as much as I used to. Green dragon, have you seen green dragon?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing on it edible.
Not the berries, not the vegetation, maybe the roots. The green dragon and the Jack in the Pulpit are very similar. They're very closely related. They have the red berry stalk that comes up in the fall. They're laying there right now in the woods. They're just all laying on the ground, the red berries. I think you can deal with the roots, but you would have to do that. You'd have to look that up. I think Native Americans use that root for something.
I
But I-
read that they used it for, like menstrual cramps and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
We
I
found
don't.
one beside our house in the woods.
But it's the roots, right?
No, we found the whole thing with the berries and everything.
Yeah, but I mean that for the tincture or the concoction is using
I
the
don't
roots.
know.
I think it's using the roots that they come up with, so medicinal stuff. I don't do a whole lot of medicinal stuff. I'm gonna sit here and tell you, I'm not a doctor, but I'm gonna tell you my theory on it. And my theory on it is we have poorly balanced diets. And we eat a lot of generic stuff that doesn't have the diets and the nutrition and the minerals that we've had for years and years and years and years. And those things do. So when you're starting to eat those greens that I'm talking about, dandelions, violets, you're starting to get potassium, you're starting to get riboflavins, you're starting to get natural stuff that probably our people ate all the time. It was probably part of their diet. That's why I'm saying Abraham Lincoln came to Indiana, and in wintertime, he was eating salt pork. So when they came springtime and they started eating those things, if you read a history book, they'll call it spring tonic.
Yeah.
Everything's a spring tonic. Well, they're eating vitamins and minerals instead of salt pork, for heaven's sake, you know? They're everything that they put in their cellars in November, now it's February. They've eaten all of that. When that green stuff starts coming, woo, it makes them feel better all the time. And I believe that we just don't always have that. Even in a lot of the food that we buy from the grocery store, the lettuces and stuff like that, doesn't always have the nutrient profile that these wild things have. So that's what, I mean, I say that's an opinion. That's probably backed up scientifically. I just can't cite the case, but there's lots of vitamins, nutrients, and minerals, especially in these greens. And I didn't even get into berries. The blackberries, the elderberries, anything that's purple has riboflavins and just so many packed nutrients there. The coloration is a clue. The purple color is like, hey, beets, hey, I'm really good for you. So that purple coloration, that is just full of stuff, full of good stuff.
But not red.
Not red, purple. Yeah, you don't want to go eat those green dragon berries. You don't want to eat the asparagus berries. You don't want to eat a lot of red berries. The purple. Well, don't eat pokeberries. Okay, forget that I said anything. But you guys kind of give up. Elderberries are actually have poison to them too. You have to really process elderberries and get all the stems off of them, and then put them in that colander and get all that stuff out of there. Make elderberry juice. If you start eating the stems and the leaves of elderberries, you're going to start getting sick.
The wine's the best way.
Pardon?
Wine's the best way to use.
Wine is the best way to use them. You're probably right. You're probably right. Okay, anything else?
Cattails.
Okay, so cattails are what I call the Walmart of the wetlands. You can get anything you want out of a cattail in the wetlands. And remember, the Ohio River, the whole scenario of the Ohio River floods and has wetlands everywhere. I mean, these cattails were everywhere. Everywhere. This is called a narrow leaf cattail, and it's a terrible example of something to eat. You can get it, but it's so I ate the stalk. You should have heard me. No, you shouldn't have heard me. Trying to get this out of my pond today. This is beyond. This is too late in the summer, really, to get cattails. They've already hardened up and gotten real pithy. But what you need to do from March or April on to about now, middle of August perhaps, definitely into July, they're still good. You reach down there and you pull the middle out. So they flag up like this, kind of. Where is that? I dragged that thing in all over. Here it is. So they kind of flag up in the middle. These kind of spread out just a little bit. And I'm saying right here in the middle, I take these, I go all the way down here. And I leave them in the lake, and I'll just tug on those. These narrow leaf ones are not very good. It's Kathleen's fault. I kept telling her we're going to pull over when we see fat cattails, but we never did really see any fat cattails. We kept seeing these narrow leaf. The ones with the really wide leaves are the best. These work too, but they're not nearly as good. Anyway, you just pull that out, and I'm not going to really. Okay, I did it. Sort of. So see what I'm getting at here. This part right here that I just pulled out of there, and I promise, in July or May or June, these are going to pull right out. And you pull those out, and you get a piece in there. With these things, they're only this big around, With a wider leaf variety, you get a piece maybe as big as your thumb, and it feels rubbery. It has the texture of a cucumber, I would say.
Water chestnut, reminds me of a water chestnut.
That's more of Katniss. The Katniss or the arrowhead is very water chestnut, very styrofoamy. This is more rubbery. So if it's got a rubbery feel to it, it's edible. And once you get up about 6 or 8 inches here, it starts getting, you can feel the air, it's crackly almost. It gets stimmy almost. So you've got that piece in there, and again, maybe this long, and it's just really good. To me, it reminds me of a cucumber. You guys eat it? Yeah. Who's eaten them before? Nobody? You've eaten some cattail stems?
Yeah.
Would you say cucumber?
Yeah, it is like cucumber, I see.
It's got the texture and the feel of cucumber. It's a little astringent. So it's gonna almost feel like it's sucking the moisture out of your mouth, just a little bit. Now it has moisture in it, but if I were to have a complaint about that, I would say, yeah, it's a little astringent there. So you can eat that stem part. You can eat this part. Now I've read where certain Native American tribes would use this as a thickener for their stew.
Yeah.
They must have been really hungry. They could stick that in there. I told you that they weren't hungry, but to use that, I don't know. I've never tried it, so I can't make an opinion, but they would take this thickness of this and put that in a stew and thicken it up, almost like cornstarch. And that's great for fire starter. The roots, I pulled this root off of here, so that I didn't get any roots with this one. but the roots have a real starchy context to them, and if you have to boil them. Mostly what I've seen is people putting them under. I've never eaten the roots, so don't eat them unless you watch somebody else eat them. Put them under the coals in the fire and just let them sit there, and then that starchy part hardens, and then you can break that open and you can eat that. The pod, actually, as the cattail part itself is growing, it'll start out as a pod, almost like an ear of corn, and as it grows, you can actually open that up, and it's like an ear of corn, so there's like little ears of corn. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're living the anti-zombie lifestyle and you see these and you're like, oh, corn on the cob, you're going to be disappointed. But it is some sort of little Cornish, that's what their seeds kind of grow into. So I have opened them, I have eaten them. It is like corn, but it's definitely not corn on the cob. But it would be similar to that. Yeah, so cattails, and then the rest of that stuff is, and these narrow ones aren't very good either, but as I tear that out, you see that little layering there? See how it kind of flips over itself there? I can stick my thumb up there. Well, they all do that, so you can, if you don't drop it, you can kind of connect those a little bit like Tinker Toys. And you can make a string of that, and you've got a water-resistant roof. So when we start talking about thatched roofs, the Native Americans would travel from the northern part of Indiana down to Kentucky into the Cane Lands and Big Bone Lake and all those places to hunt. Those were tribes that were moving. They were constantly moving, right? So they would have these little wickiups or wigwams or widgewas, whatever you want to call it. They would have those, and then they would thatch these because they were everywhere, right? Because the wetlands were everywhere. And they would thatch these together, and this would be their roof. You could make 5 or 6 of these, put them on the ground, you got a mattress. Very airy. So if you push a cattail up towards the top of the leaf, it's very airy. So it's just like making an air mattress. That really. So this is that, and then they could make twine out of that. They would be able to rip that apart, and they could make cordage out of that in certain circumstances. So cattails were huge for Native Americans and primitive societies in general. And that's part of foraging too. I know I did a lot of foraging here talking about food and stuff, but foraging is just finding stuff that you can use, to help you out. And part of that, and cattails are a huge part of that. One other thing I brought here, this is sinew. You guys ever know what sinew is? Pull this. I have a tug of war.
It's animal though.
Yeah, this is animal.
Yeah.
This came from the back strap of a deer. So I shot the deer, I cut, so this is the ribeye, right? The ribeye goes all the way down to about right here, and then you get into your back straps, which is basically your T-bones, and you get into your rump roast here. You know what I'm saying? This whole back strap from here all the way up here. You wouldn't get that at the store, they quarter it, but with the deer, because I kill it myself, I can take this part all the way up to this part, and I get a piece of, well, for a deer, I'll get a piece about that big, and then it shrinks way down, because they shrink when it gets, but when I had my bison, I could get, a piece about that big. So you tear these apart, wind them, weave them together, braid them together, you got bowstring. I can take this right here, use this as dental floss. Perfect. Sew my moccasins, my bat, I have a little bit of leather, I can sew that together. This is perfect. This stuff does wonders. It's not rawhide, you can do that too. You can kill a squirrel and make rawhide out of his skin and make bowstrings out of a squirrel string. I mean, it's fairly simple, believe it or not. And you just got to be willing to cut a deer's backstrap out. I mean, once you do that, you guys watch Naked and Afraid?
Yes, of course.
Oh yeah. So I mean, if they find a nasty, dead, rotted emu out there, they're gonna skin it and get the if they're smart. It stinks like crazy, but it might keep, I mean, that doesn't stink. If you get a rotten one, it'll stink like crazy, but that doesn't stink at all. I cut that out and I just took it up against an axe and the flesh comes off and then I've got string basically. So that's a good thing to find too. Cordage is huge. If you're in a survival situation, you gotta have some sort of string to make traps or whatever. That's good, and all of these fibrous plants are good. Stinging nettle is great. Great for fiber.
How do you tell the difference between horsetail and cane?
Well, horsetail doesn't really have leaves. The cane will eventually have leaves towards the top. It does look like Tinker Toys, it's in sections,
Well,
but you
it just
can't.
grows this tall and that's it, just about that tall.
Yeah, so you're talking about, what's the scientific name for equestrium, for the horsetail? Scouring rush.
Equisetum.
Equisetum. That's what you're talking about. It grows about yay tall.
Yeah.
The pioneers called it scouring rush.
But it doesn't ever get up bigger than that, what
No.
I'm seeing.
What they used it for was to clean their pots and pans. It's got silicone in it, and they called it scouring rush. And it gave them a real hard, like sandpaper finish, so they could clean their pots and pans with that. Bamboo or
But if it's cane, it'll grow up taller with leaves.
the cane's got leaves. You can't take those sections, so that equestrium, say it again.
Equisetum.
Equisetum will pull apart. I've heard it called Indian Tinker Toys. So you can stick it back together and you can play with it. But that cane, you can't. You'd have to break that section there. They are in sections. They both look like they're in sections, but that cane is one solid piece. You can make arrows out of that. You can't make that out of equisetum. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Come see me at Pigeon State Park. I do hike all the time.